Okay, Mr. Arnold, Paul Cundiff here. So here's what we call a shaft log. The shaft log is actually the piece of wood. The shaft log is actually the piece of wood in the boat, but this is termed as shaft log as well. So obviously made out of brass, and it goes where the shaft goes to the bottom of the boat. So there would be a piece of hose right here, and and here's your packing gland, and I have a little piece of shafting at what's like a 1-inch tube, so it's to simulate the 1-inch shaft. So you have on this packing gland a locking nut. So in order to do adjustment, you have to back this locking nut off. And I have a couple of big pairs of channel locks. They're about like 18 inches long, maybe 24 inches long, and sometimes these can be really hard to get this backed off. They also make a pair of special wrenches, but they suck. So I use the big channel locks. Now, so then once you've backed this nut off, then this packing gland can be tightened. Now let me show you what goes on inside the packing gland, so you know what you're doing when you tighten it. So you see this edge is chamfered right here, and this is the packing material. It's a flax with sometimes Teflon, sometimes graphite, sometimes both in it as a lubricant. But actually water is your lubricant when your prop is up at 1800, 2000, 3000 RPM. So when you tighten this, then here's this packing material. When you tighten this, you're squeezing that packing material into this chamfer, and the packing material can't go out, it can't go that way, and it can't come back this way. So the only thing it can do is it can expand towards the shaft. So try to get the shaft back in here, or my shaft simulation back in here. That doesn't really matter. So so if you're leaking around the shaft, what you do is you back this nut off and maybe go a half a turn, maybe a full turn, however many turns it takes to actually just shut off the flow. Then once you've shut off the flow, you really want to have that, because water is your lubricant, you really want to have 3 drops from here a minute. Well, that's nirvana. You might get lucky and get 3 drops a minute. If you do, go buy a lottery ticket on your way home. You're probably going to get 1 drop a minute, or 1 drop every couple of minutes, or you might get 5 drops a minute or 10 drops a minute. Well, once you get to that point, you really can't get any closer on your adjustment than that. So you get this adjusted where it leaks just ever so slightly, because again, that's your lubrication for your shaft, while your shaft is running bukus of RPMs. All right, then you tighten your lock nut, and you jam these guys together. You rotate this nut this direction and this nut the opposite direction, and that jams them together, and that keeps that from loosening up. So that's how you adjust your shaft packing gland. You also have packing glands on your rudder. Now your rudder, you can go ahead and keep on tightening it until the water shuts completely off, until the leak shuts completely off. That's a rudder packing gland. That's a 2-bolt style, 2-bolt flange. This is a 4-bolt flange. They do the same thing. Internally, they look the same. They do the same thing. It's just that you have to have just a little bit of water drippage to lubricate this, and you don't need any water drippage to lubricate this. You can get it too tight and affect your steering. So you just tighten it until the water stops. Just make sure your steering hasn't been affected, which it won't be unless you crank down it. I had a guy crank down on one of these so far, we couldn't run the engine. Couldn't put the engine in gear. It would kill the engine. So, and he was supposedly a good mechanic. But anyhow, that's the story of the packing gland. I'm gonna guess that this is where your leakage is in your boat, that it's a point source, as opposed to coming from all over the bottom. It's a point source, and it's coming around your shaft. So that's how you adjust them. That's what they do and how they work.